Hello, I am Elijah Armstrong. I am a lighter skinned black male with shorter locks, and I am here to introduce you to another one of our 2023-2024 Heumann-Armstrong Award videos. For those of you who don't know, the Heumann-Armstrong Award is a scholarship for students with disabilities in the 6th grade and up, including all forms of higher education, who've experienced and fought against ableism in education. We award 6 winners a year, and each time we award a winner, they shoot a video with us, giving them a chance to tell their story, and this is one of those videos. So I am really happy to introduce you to William James Carter. On screen now are the logos for all four organizations: the American Association of People with Disabilities, the Quello Center, Equal Opportunities for Students, and Esquire Bank. On screen now is the logo for the Heumann-Armstrong Award and white text on a gray background that reads, "Present 2023-2024 Heumann-Armstrong Award winner William James Carter," illustrated by Access Gallery.
My name is William James Carter. My pronouns are he, him. An image description is I'm a mixed race, light skinned man. I'm wearing glasses, tortoiseshell glasses. I've got short afro hair. I've got a mustache. I'm wearing a cross earring, and I'm wearing a red and blue Adidas tracksuit with a chain.
A headshot of William, a man with dreadlocks wearing a purple jacket, zebra print shirt, and glasses, smiling to the camera.
Where am I from? I'm from Southeast London in the United Kingdom.
An illustration of William in a yellow retro Adidas tracksuit in the same position.
What school do I go to? I go to University of California, Berkeley. I'm currently studying for a PhD in geography, and I'm a fourth year.
The campus of the University of California, Berkeley.
So I'm neurodivergent, and what that means for me is I identify as dyslexic, dyspraxic, and autistic. I got my first diagnosis of dyslexia at age 7. That was reconfigured to dyslexia, dyspraxia at age 16, and then I was diagnosed with autism around 18, 19 years old. So how does this affect me in general? It means that despite getting a first-class degree in undergrad, being a Fulbright scholar, doing a PhD, I do all of my reading in the form of audiobooks. So I use a screen reader to read to me books in PDF because I can't read analog.
William reading with a screen reader.
And how does this affect me? Well, if you get a PhD or as you're getting a PhD, what you'll realize is you're taught to scan the text. And what do I mean by that? You have 3-4 classes a semester. Each class is usually a book, 2 books per week. And they set you so much reading that pedagogically they're trying to get you to scan the reading, to not read every page and to go through it, just kind of glimpse at the key parts. Well, I don't read analog. I read text to speech. I read with an audiobook. And so I can't scan the text in the same way a non-disabled person could who doesn't need to use a screen reader. So in terms of experiences of exclusion and how it affects me in general, it means that I am excluded from the core pedagogical innovation of graduate school, which is teaching people how to scan the text and skip through books.
William next to a massive pile of books.
What you find when you go through to PhD school, and this is how it affects me to my core, is there is an assumption that a Berkeley PhD student, a Fulbright scholar, a PhD student in the US in large has to be well-spoken, has to read very well, write very well, has to be able to come up with answers like that, has to be able to quickly respond in seminar in kind of a Socratic environment, has to be able to control the room, has to be able to mentor and be mentored. And you see in each of those avenues how people's disabilities and identities will cross-fit for them. What if they use a text-to-speech reader or a computer-aided speech device and they can't respond immediately? What if they have a learning disability that affects their memory? What if they have a learning disability or difference that affects their reading potential or writing output? And you see how each of these traits of disabilities, each of these experiences, put them at odds with core definitions or core values that we ascribe to graduate students. So at my core, at Berkeley, as a PhD student, as a Fulbright scholar, I am running against the very notions and values that they have for tens of years prescribed PhD students with. As I read using an audiobook, I am directly coming against, directly contradicting, and directly having an oppositional identity to the people they wanted to let in begin with. They wanted people to come in, scan books, write fast, and get out. I can't scan books. I can't write fast. And so I'm indebted to innovating my own pedagogy and getting myself through this PhD one step at a time. When I first got to school, I didn't just hate it, I was scared. I was scared of the academic rigor, learning to read and finding it extremely difficult and not knowing how, and also the social side of things. And those contrast to both my disability and in general, race and racism and other identities I held. So I first got to school, right? And my school is a diverse area. The school is in a diverse area, but my school in particular had a lot of upper middle class and middle class white people, and a lot of upper middle class and middle class nuclear families. And I was going to school with them, right? And I was coming to school as someone from a lower income bracket. I was going to school as someone who was mixed race. I was going to school as someone whose parents didn't go to university. I'll get a 4-year college degree, right? And so I'm in these spaces and I'm learning how to read. And in the UK, it's a fairly Victorian system in which the classroom is organized according to ability. So there's 4 or 5 tables, and they go from the people with the most ability to the people with the lowest ability. And the people with the lowest ability are usually furthest away from the teacher in some regards, basically by the door, right? And they often have teaching assistants or a second assistant there. And so when I was learning to read, I was constantly reminded, geographically according to the space of the room, according to the results I was getting, that I was not as good as my peers. I was constantly reminded that this was often racialized, in that a lot of my peers who were doing well, a lot of my peers who were getting A grades or equivalent in those times were white, were middle class, were wealthier than me, were lighter skinned than me. And so before I was diagnosed with dyslexic, or even during that period, I racialized myself in that I thought the fact I couldn't read, the fact I was finding school difficult, the fact I was finding it nearly impossible to learn to write was a result of my race. In a sense, I was academically challenged because I was black.
William being excluded by a group of white children.
And that is something that internalized within me and is something that I have been working on about myself for quite some time now.
William staring into the mirror.
The difficulty with me was, it wasn't that I necessarily didn't get it. It wasn't that I couldn't spar in the classroom with the teacher and argue my point and verbally challenge or verbally show my attentiveness to the subject area. I couldn't write it. I couldn't read it. It was frustrating. I was angered by it. And so in a lot of my elementary school, what we call primary school, I had such anger, such frustration, such anger management.
William angrily struggling to write.
And what did that do? That reaffirmed and reinforced the way I racialized myself, because then not only was I academically challenged, but quote unquote, I was naughty. I had behavioral difficulties. And they didn't necessarily appear in the classroom, but more so in lunchtimes, in break times. And then I started getting some support. Age 11, I got some support. We have a thing in the UK called SATs, and SATs is a standardized exam that everyone in the country takes around 11. And I was getting quite low grades by then, and the averages that they really wanted you to get was fours. Fours were a strong pass. Fives were the top you can get, right? And I remember in the lead up to taking my SATs that I received touch typing lessons. I remember, and I received a scribe. That meant I had someone who was actually going to write the answers out for me that I verbally said. I took the SATs exam, and guess what? I got fours. I got fives. People are in disbelief. What that meant was, it wasn't about me being adept at the content. It was about being able to put that on the page, right? And this is a theme that is run throughout my education. There's a disconnect between how I can think, how I can analyze a problem, how I can verbally describe it and show verbal prowess, and my ability to either get it on the page or my ability to get that information from the written word, right? So I get to high school, and then I dip. And I dip because I got good grades, right? Fours and fives. I came to high school and I wasn't one of the kids who needed tutoring, right? Because my grades were good enough. So I kind of was in a just about managing mood without proper academic accommodations. I was still getting C's, D's, maybe even a B, right? I get to A level, and what happened was I got a better laptop. I got some assistive software. And I started to be able to actually focus on the learning and focus on strengths. So what I would do is, if I had a reading task, I would copy and paste it into Google Translate, and I would press play and get it to read it out to me, right? Or I would try and find a free software online that could read stuff out to me. And from that, I'm being able to type out my work on Microsoft Word and being able to listen to it back, importantly. I developed a strengths-based pedagogy. I taught myself how to learn in those ways. And so I went from entering the school with okay grades, then being put in the lowest academic classes for most of high school, to graduating from sixth form, what you would call the end of high school at 18, and having an A star in politics and 100% in some of the exams, one of the highest in the country, an A star in psychology, and an A in geography. And graduating with one of the highest, if not at the time, the highest grade and results my school had ever seen.
William graduating high school with honors.
And so you saw this transition, right? This transition from this internal racialization that saw my ability to communicate through writing and through reading, making me think I couldn't handle the content. This anger, this frustration, to learning a strengths-based approach to learning, to teaching myself, to demarcating the difference between knowing the content and being able to communicate that content by the written word. And you saw me develop a strengths-based approach to that and end up being able to actually put on a page via typing, via text-to-speech, via speech-to-text, what I was thinking, and finally getting recognized. But what does that mean? How do I like school now, right? I've got through my undergrad with a first class degree. I'm doing a PhD. I'm dealing with the very same challenges. And I enter these classrooms and people do not even think I exist. How did I get to this point with these disabilities? How did I get to this level by only reading with a text-to-speech device? How did I get to this level by having to type something and listen to it back? And so my experience becomes impossible, and my positionality becomes impossible. And so I get excluded from this university.
William being doubted by Berkeley professors.
The difference is I no longer internalize it by racialization to be the fault of mine. I know where the fault exists. The fault never existed with me. The fault never exists with us. The fault exists with structures that do not accommodate us. Structures that through their positionality act as if we don't exist. The fight is not internal in ourselves. The fight is against these structures. The fight is to restructure, reinstitutionalize, and build infrastructures that actually support us. So what is school like for me? A continuous fight. Experience with ableism in school, at Berkeley, it is pervasive. right? To get a PhD in the social sciences at Berkeley, there are 3 or 4 key milestones in a PhD, right? You take graduate courses, and graduate courses are often 1 to 2 books a week, as I mentioned. You're often expected to either buy them, or you can just get them from the library, right? And then in every graduate course, you have an essay set at the end, a paper. That's one part. Second part is you take a thing called a qualifying exam. And a qualifying exam, at least in my department of the social sciences, is a 3 to 4 hour oral exam in which you're tested on your comprehension and analysis of around 150 texts, 150 books, split into 3 lists. So 3 core themes, and under each theme about 50 books. The third part of it is to do a dissertation prospectus, to actually write a proposal into what your intended PhD is, right? And the final part is to write this PhD, to write and to research this PhD. And so let's take those milestones that I described. And right now, as you're listening to this, I want you to Google the Disabled Students Program at Berkeley, and Google the Disabled Students Program, or what we say DSP for short, Graduate Student Handbook. That is the handbook that they ask students to be aware of and read, that should describe and lay out the procedures relating to accommodating us into this graduate school, right? This should be where we get information about this. And I'll do this backwards, and the most important. I want you to go on there and see if you can see any accommodations, any information on accommodations, research accommodations for writing your PhD. I want you to go on there and see if you can find any information, any guidance on research accommodations for doing your particular survey responses, your archival work, your ethnographic work. I want you to go on there and see if you can find any guidance, any reference to accommodations on preparing for your qualifying exam. That's either accommodations within the exam itself or leading up to it in terms of whether you need e-text or any alternative media for your qualifying exam. I want you to go back and see specific research accommodations guidelines for taking a graduate course with its particular reading load, research accommodations or disability accommodations for engaging in an advising meeting with your PhD advisor. What will you find if you search up these things? Nothing. And this isn't because they don't know. I have written so many emails, so many reports. I have organized 3 town halls. I have organized a focus group. I have organized a meeting with the Chancellor. I have had the job as the graduate student for the Graduate Assembly, graduate student, disabled student project director. I've literally been employed to gather research about this.
William organizing a town hall at Berkeley.
To present that to this campus. But nothing ever gets done. I have been here for 4 years and I've been fighting every day. I've been writing emails every day. I've been having meetings with senior faculty, senior staff, senior admins, vice chancellors, assistant vice chancellors, and I have not been able to get anything done. It's hard to prescribe ableism to these individuals, right? Because you meet with them and you think, oh, they seem nice. They seem woke. But when you look at the institutions of which they provide over, it excludes us at every single milestone. It's as if we don't exist.
People with disabilities being excluded from Berkeley.
And because of ableism, because of racism, because of the way the economy is structured, we get into these spaces and we mask and hide. Why? Because we are told you have to apply for jobs soon. They don't want disabled faculty, so you can't be a disabled graduate student. And so at every level, whether it's the research accommodations or accommodations at key milestones in your projects, whether it's getting the necessary resources and education to get into graduate school, or once you're here, by professional development and listening to your advisors, masking yourselves, and hiding your disabilities. You are invisibilized across the board. What is my experience at Berkeley? Berkeley is meant to be the leader in the disability rights movement, or at least it was. It keeps on telling itself it was. It keeps on telling itself it is. And what is true then is true now. What was true then was, it was never the faculty, the senior administrators, the staff that gave or bequeathed the rights of disabled students to disabled students. It was those disabled students constantly fighting the administration to get rights.
Ed Roberts leading a march for disability rights.
We are most excluded via this insidious movement towards simply thinking about disability via compliance. Don't think that talk of the ADA and disability rights can protect you. Don't think that. Don't aim low, aim high. We are not here to talk about rights and flaws. We are here to talk about the ceiling, what can be done. We need to completely rethink graduate school from the perspective of neurodivergent disabled students. You may think that sounds like such a big task. We're here to tell you that we've likely already done it. We've sent the emails, we've had the town halls, we've done the surveys, we've got the reports, the projects, the poetry, the art, the songs, the culture to do this. It's that we are silenced and pushed out.
An art show for disabled people.
I am a fourth year doing a PhD. How many people go on medical leave, get shifted out, leave, or never get to graduate school, never get to college, never get to a graduation? How many more people with my identities as a Black disabled man would you find at San Quentin as opposed to UC Berkeley? In that answer is everything you need to know about ableism and how ableism intersects with racism and the economic system to forcibly exclude Black, disabled, neurodivergent peoples.
A disabled man sitting in prison.
I have an interesting relationship to the disability rights movement. Because very often what happens is, whenever we do anything, or I try and do anything at Berkeley related to disability, what the response always comes down to is, no matter what the challenge, no matter what the charge, no matter what the criticism, Berkeley is still doing better than other campuses. Or Berkeley is still leading this. We often use historical student activism and historical student organizing to create distance between ourselves and problems, between ourselves and current contemporary issues of students organizing. It's very easy to look at the 1970s and Ed Roberts and the Rolling Cross and think, wow, look at what they did. My relationship with the disability rights movement is a complicated one. Often because whenever it's spoken to me or told to me, it's told to me in the spirit of silencing me, in the spirit of cheapening my wants or my demands with the historical, absolute history of they couldn't even get in the room. There was no ramps. Look at what they fought for. We can't get in the room now. We're in prison. We can't get in the room now. We're going on medical leave. We can't get in the room now. We can't get the book scanned on time. We can't get in the room now because we can't get accommodations for our QEs, for our research. I had the absolute privilege of meeting Judy Heumann last year. They came to Berkeley. I met them over 3 days at 3 separate times. And each one of those times I described a little bit about what Berkeley was like, about some of the things I was experiencing, some of the ableism, the ableists are experiencing. We exchanged numbers. We talked about it. And there was a way that I saw the campus's very unique and very interesting relationship to her, a very interesting relationship to Ed Roberts, right? We honored Judy Heumann. We invited them to give talks in our campus. We talked about Ed Roberts. We talked about the Rolling Cross, right? 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, did we do that? The only reason they were activists in the first place is because we were denying them services. We enabled their activism through our, and when I mean our, I mean institutionally as Berkeley, denying them services. There is a way in honoring, and I mean institutional honoring of historical activists. We are silencing contemporary ones. What I found most awe-inspiring about Judy Heumann was she was being interviewed by the law school dean, and Dean Irwin, and one of the students in her talk raised their hand and complained about a lack of access in law school. The way Judy looked at this law school dean, dressing him down with her eyes, the way, the empathy, the direct humanity she looked at this student was all you need to know.
Judy Heumann talking to the Dean of Berkeley Law.
After the event, when I went to talk to them, do you know what I saw? This dean groveling to Judy Heumann and trying to explain how this student wasn't quite informed and they wasn't quite there. And I looked at Judy's face and you could tell she was smiling, but she had made her decision and she knew what was up. The same way we treated Judy Heumann, Ed Roberts back then in denying them services, we're treating students now. And they knew that, and we know that. So I think the best way we can honor our disability rights mentors and our disability rights heroes is in refusing to use them to silence contemporary activists, contemporary agitators, contemporary subversives who are doing the same work that they did.
William leading a new generation of disability activists in a march. Thank you, William, for sharing your story with us. You can find more about William in the description of the video, as well as videos from our other winners of the Heumann-Armstrong Award this year, previous years of Heumann-Armstrong Award winners, as well as more information on all of the organizations that have come together to allow this award to happen. Lead on, everyone.